they never looked at the larger picture. How does this communicate with the system? How does this tie in with the network? I can't tell you how many times we've gone on site, we've done this system, and then we find out that they have no network connectivity on the floor. So, here we are implementing the SCADA system, and they say, hey, come out here, do this. We can't get it to work. So we send out one of our controls engineers to support, and they say, okay, well, where's your network?
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Automation technologies are advancing at a rapid pace. There are tons of options available, whether you are looking to automate some of the operations of your production process, or you may be automating process steps such as trailer unloading that are essential but may not be billable. And the more repeatable tasks you can automate in your facility, the better quality products you can produce, and the more cost effective your products will be. But to take full advantage of these technologies, you need your information systems to be fully connected and integrated. In today's episode, we have our guest, Jake Hall, who discusses the current state of automation and challenges with its adoption in manufacturing industries. He also discusses the reasons for the success and failures of automation initiatives and describes several automation technologies available for industrial manufacturers and distributors. Finally, he shares several stories of where automation technologies make sense and where they might be overkill. Let me introduce Jake to you. A business development manager at Fan Zelstra, Jake Hall manages local and national accounts while leveraging his manufacturing expertise in support his customers' modernization and Industry 4.0 projects. An experienced sales professional, he builds lasting business relationships across multiple accounts, designs sales strategies, and creates project goals. His passion for automation and high-tech manufacturing manifests itself in his LinkedIn account, The Manufacturing Millennial. With 20,000 followers and counting, he ignites conversations about the latest in manufacturing industry. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Jake, welcome to the show.
Sam, it's great to be finally on, man. We've been trying to schedule this guy for months.
I know, you are a big guy. You are very hard to get hold of, and finally I have you. So I am super excited to dig into your background and the insight that you bring to the table. Just to kick things off, do you want to introduce yourself to our audience and tell your personal story and current focus?
Absolutely. That'd be great. So my day job is I'm a business development manager for a company called Fan Zelstra. We're a systems integrator that works with large manufacturers and also small to medium-sized businesses as well, helping with automation and their manufacturing world. That's my day job. And then at nighttime, I switch my hats and I turn on what I call my personal brand, the Manufacturing Millennial, where I love highlighting content on social media, really talking about manufacturing and automation and bringing more awareness to the community and why automation is important, what companies need to be aware of when looking at automating, and really just making some awesome networks and conversations along the way.
Yeah, Jake, and I have to tell you this. I have always been super impressed with your content, and you keep telling me that you are spending only 30 minutes of your day, which just sounds unrealistic, to be honest. So you must be ultra efficient, which is a compliment for you. So thank you so much for doing that.
So some days are 30 minutes. Some other days could be a couple hours. But on a good day, we'll say on a good day, it's 30 minutes, Sam.
But you are amazing. I mean, your content is obviously awesome. Okay, and obviously you are very efficient as well. Okay, so we are going to dig into all of that. But we have one of these standard questions for all of our guests, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth, Jake.
Oh, man. We are in for a very, very, very exciting 5 to 10 year forecast in manufacturing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's when we come back and we look at what the pandemic caused in the US in terms of how we're handling the supply chain, how we're handling manufacturing. I think what happened was, Sam, is it took what was going to happen 10 or 15 years down the road from now, and it made it happen in a 12 to 18 month period of time. In terms of companies realizing, when it comes to supply chain, how it's important to have maybe more localized sources, reshoring itself. Companies in terms of looking at automation as something they could postpone for a long period of time might come back and say, you know what? I think it's time now, considering I can't find anyone to come and work for us. So the industry is really adapting. But the other thing as well is more people are buying consumer products than ever before. And I think that's continue to happen. A lot of people are buying stuff right now because they didn't travel on vacations. They got stimulus checks. But what's going to continue to happen is more and more domesticated product is going to be consumed here in the U.S., which is going to drive more manufacturing down the road.
Yeah, amazing. And one of the things that I always notice on your content is you are crunching a lot of data. Okay, that is something I am not noticing in anybody else's content, and you are doing that data from the future perspective as well. And you call yourself manufacturing millennial. I think you should be calling yourself as manufacturing forecaster. So on that note, I am going to be asking one question related to overall projecting the manufacturing, right? So if you look at the state of manufacturing right now, are you happy with the kind of automation that is happening right now in the manufacturing, especially when we talk about these SMB manufacturers, some of these machine shops, right? They are always complaining about talent. Obviously, there is a real problem of talent. But are you happy with the state of automation right now?
I am. Let me answer that in two questions and two answers, Sam. The first one is, am I happy with the current resources that are available in the state of manufacturing? So let's talk about how technology has advanced. Collaborative robots, AMRs, AGVs, automated bin picking, vision guidance, artificial intelligence, vision inspection. That technology has advanced so much in the past 5 years. The state of automation in terms of solutions is fantastic. We have so many available resources now. Now let's talk about the implementation of those solutions. That's where there's a lot more that needs to happen. I think there's been so much ideology around automation that it was a super expensive, huge capital investment solution. And Sam, it's just not that way anymore. There's so many more solutions out there that a small to medium-sized business, a CEO or CFO could have really easily justification now to say, wow, I can buy this flexible robot that I can implement into my machine tending CNC shop, for example, for relatively low cost, if not even a capital cost, an operational cost, because there's solutions out there now. Now, it's not going to be right for everyone, where you can go out and you can rent a robot. I mean, so there's so many different solutions out there where I think the technology is there, but the current state is people need to be more aware and be willing to learn about what technology can help solve their current problems and demands.
Yeah, so we are going to touch into all of those buzzwords. The one that you threw out, I guess, a lot of people are not going to be familiar with, let's say, AMRs, vision system. I think they might be familiar with, but I think we are going to dig into all of those in understanding what they really do for manufacturers. But before we do that, let's talk about some of the barriers. And what are going to be some of the barriers, especially when it comes to implementation? What are some of the challenges that you are seeing in the market that manufacturers are not really understanding the value? Is it really education, or is it just the fear?
There's several barriers, and great that Sam, that's a great topic. I think one of the barriers I see manufacturers face right now is they don't believe their current resource or their current employees have the knowledge or capability to implement automated solutions.
Yeah.
A lot of times people, manufacturers out there and the owners say, well, this automation system is great. I can see the production value, but what happens when something happens and I can't service it? How do I do that? I've now relied on the original manufacturer to support me on that. And in cases there's true, and I think one of the big barriers is just the demand for controls engineers and designers and electricians who have industry experience is so high right now. People see there's risk involved with that. And that's one of the demands I see, Sam, is just companies worried that they don't have the support to do that. And there's conversations we can have around dispelling that myth, and there are a lot of resources available. I think the other, big myth that we would add on to it, or you would say, barrier to automation, is just companies have always viewed automation as a plain cut ROI justification. I'm investing this amount of capital in this time, and if I don't have this amount of return, it's not worth it. And I think when we're looking at it from a post-pandemic perspective, is you're almost getting an insurance policy on your company now when you implement automation solutions. Because let's face it, the companies who had automated solutions during the pandemic were able to keep production up versus the ones that were very labor intensive, had to completely restructure how they're doing production. So that's one. The other one that I would say, Sam, is just when you look at ROI justification, it's no longer just, can I take these amount of late workers off this line for this long? It's how often are you replacing those workers? How much money are you investing as a company in your recruitment? And that's one of those costs a lot of times where, they don't think about justification. But listen, if you have a person, you're having to train them every 90 days on this machine because you have such a high turnover, that's not just production cost. That's overhead cost that needs to be factored in from a manufacturing perspective of going in and saying, there's cost to that. One of the models that I have when you talk about data, Sam, I think it goes back to one of those LinkedIn posts I had where companies should focus less on recruiting and more on retraining within their own program. How can you take existing workforce and labor and invest in them to solve and address those worries that you have?
Yeah, so you touch on a lot of different points there, and I want to make sure that I am addressing some of those, especially when you talk about this ROI calculation. Obviously, a lot of people are thinking about ROI, but if I think about the overall ROI, the way they calculate, and I think you touch on that point as well, I don't think the manufacturers, especially, they don't have the same financial literacy that is required to be able to compute the ROI, because that requires you to factor in a lot of different cost elements, including your opportunity cost. Okay. And
absolutely.
In case of SME manufacturers, I don't know how many times they really factor in, okay, if I have my internal employee, am I factoring in that cost as well? Because if they take, let's say, 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours for the same job, and if there is going to be a contractor who's going to come in and they are going to fix within 30 minutes, who's cheaper? Even though the contractor may be charging, let's say, $200 an hour, but they are finishing that in 30 minutes. The other person is taking 30 hours. You could do a lot of different things, from the personalizing the customer experience. Oh my goodness. I mean, there is just no limit in terms of how much you can personalize the customer experience. And you are always going to have the limitations in terms of the number of resources you can allocate in your customer experience department, but still you can probably do more than your competitor. The other thing that I really want to touch on, the retraining aspect that you mentioned, and this is the complaint that I hear pretty much from every manufacturer, that I'm not able to find machinists. Machinists are not there. How do I find machinists? And the my challenge is, I mean, we complain about the same challenges as well. We are in the ERP space, that okay, the talent does not exist for ERP either. It takes roughly 8 years for anybody to be able to do anything in the ERP space. So where do we find ERP consultant? We train them.
Absolutely.
So how are you not able to train a machinist? A machinist is simply using the machine. Obviously, you require a little bit of programming skill or whatever, but you can still train anybody and everybody, I guess. So yeah, so I completely agree with those arguments there. Now let's go back to the barriers overall. So one of the things that you mentioned is really the skill set. I get that. But one of the things that I am hearing in the community is really going to be the outcome of these initiatives. So whenever manufacturers, let's say, implement these solutions, I don't know how many times they are going to be successful. Now they could fail because of a lot of different reasons. Those could be they don't have the right data that your vision system is going to require to be able to perform, or you
Absolutely.
don't really have the centralized state of your own current system, or maybe you have a skill issue, or maybe you had collaboration issue with the vendor. Now if you're going to blame that, you know what, automation doesn't work, it's not going to help anyone. So we need to fix these underlying issues, right? So in your experience, okay, are you seeing these initiatives, and these initiatives are extremely expensive, right? Are you seeing a lot of success rate? If you are seeing, what are some of the core reasons? If you are seeing failure, what are those reasons?
Yeah, I think so. Great points. One thing that we do, Sam, is a lot of times when we're going into large projects, we'll do an
Yeah,
upfront engineering study, is what we
yeah,
like to call it, or engineering study, process review. There's
yeah,
different terminologies for it, but that's such a great point. I'm just
yeah,
thinking, it's one of those things is a lot of times people don't understand the big picture. And I think that's one of the biggest issues where you see automated systems, everything was designed properly, but what they end up finding the day is they never looked at the larger picture. How does this communicate with the system? How does this
yeah,
tie in with the network? I can't tell you how many times we've gone on site, we've done this system, and then we find out that they have no network connectivity on the floor. So, here we are implementing the SCADA system, and they say, hey, come out here, do this. We can't get it to work. So we send out one of our controls engineers to support, and they say, okay, well, where's your network? Well,
yeah,
what do you mean?
yeah,
Well, you want us to access all this data on your machine,
yeah,
but the machine doesn't even have a network card.
yeah,
You know, so
yeah, yeah,
so it goes back to, well, we didn't think about that. It's like, yeah, so we're gonna have to go in now, open the panel up. We're gonna have to put in a network card from you, and so
yeah,
that that's a small example, but I think a lot of times people don't realize is there's much more to a project when they're automating, and automation can be extremely successful. It can go
yeah.
off of not necessarily without a hitch, but it can be very successful with all parties involved. However, you need to make sure all parties are involved from the start.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a little bit of collaboration there. I would say it has to be from both sides. It cannot be just one side. Hey, I am buying a product. Hey, just put it in my environment and it's going to work automatically. It doesn't work that way. None of the technologies work that way. It requires a little bit of collaboration from both ends. So now let's talk about those technologies, the one that you have mentioned, right? So let's take an example of AMR. So let's say if the manufacturers are not familiar with the AMR technology, what it is, who does it help? What kind of manufacturers can get help using the AMR technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So AMR stands for Autonomous Mobile Robot. Now, you've
Okay.
probably seen similar systems, and I think the more common terminology in the world is AGV, which
Yeah.
is auto guided vehicle. And these
Yeah.
have been around for decades, longer than I've been alive, Sam, to put that in
Yeah.
perspective. And for a long time, they, followed a magnetic strip around a factory floor,
Yeah.
and they moved product from point A to point B to point C in a continuous loop a lot of times to
Yeah.
reduce the amount of material and product handling that a person would have to do manually. What we're seeing more and more is instead of needing magnet strips, there's new technology out there, and we won't get into the depths of that, but there's new technology out there that allows these robots to travel around facilities somewhat autonomously. So what manufacturers are using these for now, instead of having an operator who needed to ride on a tugger and move product from the finished goods area out to the shipping department, or from the
Yeah.
crib area that we're getting all these raw components to bring to the assembly, instead of having a person riding around a high-low or a tugger or pushing a cart around all day,
Yeah.
they're using these automated systems to help support them. So, when I look at it as a solution to them, and just as a 10,000 foot view, I say,
Yeah.
to manufacturers or facility managers or something like that, do you have people who are walking around your floor 80% of the day pushing product, where they are not necessarily a billable transaction, right? If you're making parts, that operator's making parts, that is a billable process. But if all this person is doing is moving product from point A to point B, that person's not billable. He's just it's just a cart pusher. So how can you take, especially with almost every single manufacturer facing the skill gap and just the labor shortage in general right now, how can you take these repeatable mobile tasks and look at using robotics or automated mobile vehicles as a solution to, reduce the constraint on your labor force?
Okay, so let's talk about some of the improvements. Obviously, from the technology perspective, these things have been there for a while. Obviously, there have been barriers in their adoption. I don't know how adopted they are right now. Do you have any stories that you might be able to share where you are seeing the adoption for AMR? What was the core challenge? I mean, the challenge could be, I'm simply excited about the technology, right? And now I don't know if those are the right fit. What I'm really looking for is a story where they had the real challenge. Okay, and then they installed the AMR technology and they could solve their problems using this technology.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. Let's talk about the facts about AMRs real quick.
Yeah.
When we look at the robotics industry itself, when you put a quotations around robots, we think mainly right now in manufacturing industrial robots. Those are the 6-axis robots that are out there. Follow that, we think of collaborative robots, the cobots, the interactive ones that don't necessarily need a fenced-in area to move. The next area of robotics that's really going to be impacting is the world of AMRs. In fact, there will be more AMRs and AGVs in the next 10 years implemented in manufacturing in the automation and distribution center than industrial robots. So there will be more mobile robots on manufacturing and warehouse floors than there will be assembly robots in 10 years. And it's just crazy to think about how for so long when we think of manufacturing and robotics, we always thought of here's these really fast robots moving around assembling parts together. That's not going to be the case in 10 years. What's going to be the case in 10 years is the material handling of that is going to be the largest robotics solution.
Yeah.
When we talk about a case study, I go back to a system that I integrated several years ago for a warehouse facility that had probably close to 600,000 square feet of warehouse space and factory floor. So a rather large facility. But one thing that we're always facing was the labor demand for safe and reliable forklift drivers. The forklift driver is actually one of the most common positions and jobs behind engineers in the manufacturing industry, because we think almost every manufacturing facility has probably multiple drivers. So that's an interesting fact there. But what we wanted to do is say, okay, how can we take these repetitive tasks where people were just taking product from the docking station and then bringing them to all the different bays within the manufacturing facility? Well, now they took these pallets, implemented them, and put them on robots, and the pallet went from point A to point B, where a high-load driver normally spent 8 minutes to do a round trip, now can handle production at a lot more efficient rate while handling these products off to robots. And what it did, they found out as well, is it increased, the opportunity for safety, right? With these robots, you're not going to have distracted driving in a facility with a giant stack of product in front of the driver as he's driving around. You have all these safety scanners and motion sensors and ultrasonic sensors built into the bases of these AMR solutions that are also making your factory floor a lot safer. So the ROI on that was about 14 months for justification for these manufacturers, but for them, they love the solution so much they began to implement more of them at different locations throughout the facility, just because it was one of those tasks where they don't need to have a forklift driver doing these what they call unskilled docking tasks coming from trailers. They were able to unload trailers at a much more efficient rate.
Yeah, interesting facts and scenario there, and the story as well. So let's take an example of slightly smaller warehouse, and I don't know if these robots are going to be equally impactful and if we are going to have the same kind of ROI. Let's say if we take a smaller warehouse, let's say 50,000 square feet. Do you see an application in such smaller warehouses as well? Or do you believe that, you have to have at least 100,000, 200,000, 300,000
No,
before?
you definitely don't need that square footage. I mean, yeah, the larger square footage is more justification, right? Because you have
Yeah,
people moving around more. But even for smaller applications, you see product supplying. So instead of an operator having to take a finished box of product, put it on a pallet, and then that pallet gets picked up by a forklift, and then it's brought over to shipping, that's undocked, stacked out, and then brought out for shipping. What they're doing now is they were having smaller robots that, as a operator completed an individual smaller box, they loaded that right on the robot, and that was brought right to shipping. So you don't have all this additional. And Sam, you know what I'm talking about. You walk on a manufacturing floor, and you're walking by a completed goods machine. More than likely, there are just dozens of skids of either uncompleted goods that still have to have post-processing, or completed goods that are needed to be picked up. Imagine what you could do with that warehouse and that floor space if you made everything coming in and out by that production area a lot more streamlined, where you could open up your manufacturing space by 50% to add more machines, because you don't have to have all this product just laying there right next to the machine. So, this is another example where floor space is a commodity, especially for these smaller businesses that are trying to grow and they don't have hundreds of thousands of square feet. How can you make your process more streamlined to bring product in and bring product out at a much more efficient rate?
Yeah, completely agree with your insight there. So let's talk about these vision systems. And vision systems have been there for some time. I don't know how accurate they were, and I don't know how accurate they are right now. If I look at the manufacturing facilities, I mean, they still have very manual process for their quality department. In fact, they are not even able to check the quality of every single product that is coming out of their production line. So typically they are going to have some sort of sampling process, and that's what they typically utilize, just because they don't really have a way to gather the data completely for each of the product that is coming out of the product line. They don't really have their systems integrated, whether you talk about the data histogram or SPC or SPC going to MES or ERP, they are not integrated. So what are some of the advances that you have seen in the vision system, and do you see this completely automated in next 4 to 5 years?
Oh, 4 to 5 years, no.
Okay.
No. But what I would say though, Sam, is the solutions on vision systems are, and the tools available are rapidly becoming more advanced. So I'll break the vision system down to its most basic terms, and we'll build up from there. When we're looking at a vision system, a lot of times we're using a camera-based imager to look at a group of pixels. And within that group of pixels, we're either counting the pixels or we're measuring the dimension of those pixels to give us an idea of, is that part good or bad? Kind of doing a poke yoke system through vision checking. What the tool set required is a person had to manually draw a tool set around what we're inspecting and to be able to determine what that is in terms of being good or bad. What we're learning now is with vision systems is artificial intelligence is something that's becoming a lot more available within low-cost systems, where no longer do we need to have a operator who has a lot of vision experience look at a bunch of good parts and bad parts. We can just simply train it and saying, okay, camera, look at this area. What you're looking at right now is a good part. Here's another good part. Here's another good part. Here's a bad part. Self-learn the difference. So now vision systems now have the ability of artificial intelligence to automatically qualify and quantify what is a good part and bad part with little knowledge on the user end.
Yeah, that's a very interesting scenario, and we are seeing the AI in the background a lot in every single tool and application out there. Whether you are going to be talking about any of the business technology, operational technology, or the hardware, everywhere we are seeing the application of the AI, and they are going to be far more accurate overall in the future. But
Absolutely.
I would still be worried about the integration part. Right. So I don't know, from your experience, let's say, even if the vision systems become smarter, right? But I mean, if they are not necessarily connected with some of the other systems that are going to be on the shop floor, so they are not going to have as much contextual knowledge as they would if they were actually connected with the other systems as well. So are you seeing any trends where these technologies are going to be integrated with, let's say, the operational technology as well as your business technology?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole idea of when you're looking at Industry 4.0 and the eye of
Yeah,
data, right?
yeah,
Everything's getting connected now. And there's great benefits to that. There's risks as well. But the one thing that I think manufacturers are learning more on, there is value in the data on their floor. And if
yeah,
they can have a better idea of, like, for example, a vision system, right? Collecting that data and understanding why that system failed can be
yeah,
used to prevent that failure down the road. If I'm assembling product ABC and I'm
yeah,
learning that this individual component within this part is my main course of failure, you a lot of times you can't track that data as an individual operator because that operator doesn't care. But when you're able to take that data and look at
yeah,
it from a higher level, and you could say, wow, 45% of my failures for the past week and a half were as a result of this component here within this
yeah,
assembly. Why? And that's
yeah.
what's getting really exciting with data. Is before it was such a discrete yes or no answer, we never were able to understand why.
I completely agree. So let's talk about these risks, the one that you were mentioning in your commentary. And obviously, one of the risk is going to be cybersecurity. And I see the two different camps of manufacturers, one of which is going to be slightly more on board with the technology. The other ones are not going to be as comfortable, right? So when we look at the camp which is not as comfortable, they have never had their shop floor connected with the internet. And I think that you mentioned in one of your stories as well that they didn't have to worry about the cybersecurity issues on the shop floor because traditionally shop floors were not connected with the internet. But now with the IIoT, now everything is going to be connected with the internet, and obviously that brings the issues around cybersecurity and operational security. So, what are some of the trends that you are seeing that manufacturers need to be aware of as far as the cybersecurity and the operational security goes?
Absolutely. I mean, it goes back to the whole thing. Sam, are you familiar with Stuxnet?
A little bit. I don't know if my listeners are going to be familiar. So, do you want to describe that?
Yeah, so we'll do it very high level. So
Yeah,
Stuxnet was a thing that happened back in 2005 to 2010,
yeah,
where the CIA, along with a bunch of other countries and organizations, looked at hacking the Iranian Nuclear Enrichment Center
yeah,
and using a backdoor through a Siemens PLC. Those are the same
yeah,
PLCs that you use on your manufacturing floor, and basically hacking that in a way that would destroy the system. And I think that brought in a lot of wear. For a long time, we always thought of hackers and cybersecurity being these large corporations or large infrastructure systems, and we're beginning to find out more and more that it can be the everyday manufacturer and end user as well. Now, I don't want to all of a sudden go on that and spread fear and say, oh my gosh, we're going to get hacked.
yeah,
That's not what it is. We're not here to spread fear. We're here to give information and to show you what you can be aware of. So,
yeah,
going back to the whole Stuxnet thing, it brought an idea of you need to be an understanding of how you're securing your systems. If you are putting networks on your manufacturing floor, you need to understand how do you secure these networks? What are you doing to create a DMZ zone
yeah,
within your network to basically, and Sam, you're much more of an expert in this area than I am. But
yeah,
what can you do to create a DMZ zone around your network facilities so everything that's coming in
yeah,
from the cloud is being separated and isolated for the products and machines you're having on your floor?
okay,
And I think it's one of those things that we look at is when you're bringing in network capability on your machine, are you making sure you're taking the correct precautions and procedures to make sure you're keeping your machines and your network and your company secure?
interesting. And I want to make sure that we are covering all the automation stories that you have. And obviously, you come across a lot more than I do, to be honest. Do you have any other automation stories that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think the other big thing right now is just stories. It kind of goes back to that conversation we had earlier, Sam. Justification of labor on your manufacturing floor. And
Yeah,
I want companies to realize that, listen, we are in a huge demand right now for skilled labor, skilled trades, but also just labor in general. And
yeah,
companies need to look at automation not as this idea where we're going to be taking people's jobs. I see automation in the future is processes that work alongside operators. That's where automation, and I see the future of it's going, is not to take an operator away from a job, but how can automation and workers work side by side? So here's another case study I'm at. I'm working with a customer saying, so what are you looking at automating the system for? They want to add some robotic picking and stacking and do that. And the reason why they're doing it is because simply they lost over 40 workers in the past 3 months because they went over to Amazon. And I'm not here to make Amazon the big bad wolf, but manufacturers need to realize that competition is no longer just overseas. Competition's in your backyard and within different industries as itself. The common worker who worked on your manufacturing floor might be the next person who's packing your box to be delivered to you in 2 days. And we need to look at that from a manufacturing perspective. It's not just ROI justification of I need to take this worker and move them elsewhere. It's that whole idea of retraining and repurposing is how can I take my current labor force and make them more valued, make them have more responsibility, but also be able to pay them more because you're educating them more and you're giving them more skilled services. Take that person who ran that machine and did it manually, put a robot in it, and have them be the cell lead for that to make sure production's being run, making sure that's the materials, making sure it's meeting, OEE, the overall equipment effectiveness of that machine demand. Take the people who understand and super knowledgeable about your machine and use that resource and knowledge. So what the company ended up doing is they had an ROI justification that was a lot longer than what you typically think of your 12 to 24 months or even 12 to 18 months, just because they had so much turnaround on that machine. They spent more investment and money training people how to run that machine than just the actual paying the people to run it on a normal operation. And that's just the big thing I want to go back on. And that was the big justification we didn't think they were going to say yes to with the cost of that machine. But they said yes because it costs an operator about this amount of time to run it, but the resources we were investing to train these people continuously on how to run that machine was where our cost justification came from. So that's the one thing, I look at as well with any solution, whether it be ERP or a SCADA system or a robot or automation system, truly understand what is the investment you're putting in on these systems and how can that be a larger return on investment than what you think is just the single operator itself?
Interesting stories. And I just want to go on, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts, Jake?
I'll say this because it's my passion. I'll use the podium to stand on my chair, Sam. For those of the people who are listening to this, understand your future is investing in your local resources and centers. If you're a manufacturer, get connected with your local community college who has a mechatronics program, who has an automation program, and work with them. Work with your future employees now rather than later when they come to work with you so that they're prepared. And use your opportunity you have as a business owner, as a leader within your company to invest in the future workforce, rather that be millennials or the current generation right now who's going back to school to learn how to program a robot, to learn how to set up a CNC machine. Work in your community to invest in the future of manufacturing.
Amazing insights there. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be, obviously, you have tons and tons of technologies available now. It's up to you how you want to utilize those. But one of the critical things that you need to do to be able to adopt and get the ROI from these initiatives is going to be just reskill your entire team. And that includes yourself as well. You need to re-educate yourself in terms of how the new world works. The more educated you are, the more researched you are, the more comfortable you are going to feel with the technologies. On that note, Jake, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a very insightful episode.
Sam, I'm so glad we were able to finally have this.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Jake, head over to feinzylstra.com. It's FEYENZYLSTRA.com. Or follow his personal brand, Manufacturing Millennial, on LinkedIn. It's MANUFACTURINGMILLENNIAL. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Martin Davis, who discusses the strategies to improve your manufacturing facility's capacity and increase the overall equipment effectiveness of your equipment. Also, the interview with Mike Yost, who discusses the difference between performance management, production management, and asset management on the shop floor. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.